Hey guys, this is just one guy and I'm back here with another Unity tutorial. Now someone was asking about my tile system. I assumed in the game Superhuman that I was making, and so I decided to show everybody how I made it. But the first step in making it is spawning a world. Now today we're going to learn how to generate a random world, and it's really simple, and so we're just going to go through it now. The first thing we have to do is go into Visual Studios. Okay, now I'm here in Visual Studios and we have our script. And the first thing we have to do is get rid of the start and update functions. Oops, sorry. The next thing we have to do is give the two variables the length and the width of the world. It's just basically how long we want the world to be and how wide we want the world to be. So we're just going to put those up now. Oops, sorry. Okay, the next thing we're going to want is to know how many, when we spawn the cubes, we want to know how many of them we spawn. And this is important because when you start spawning a world and you spawn the cubes, you don't want to spawn too many to where the computer can't handle it. And the last thing we need is the actual prefab, which is just going to be a simple cube. And these are going to be what we're using to spawn the entire world. Just put that in. And the next thing we need is a function called spawn ground. This function is going to take two variables, the width and the length of the world. Now the next thing we're going to need is the width offset and the length offset. Now as we're spawning the cube, we want the next cube to spawn next to it. And these are going to be the two variables that tell the cube where to spawn based on the X and Z position. We don't have to worry about the Y position right now because we're not spawning upward. We're just spawning left and right and back and forth. So we're just going to put those right here, the X and the width and the length, and we're going to set them to 0. The next thing we need is a variable called ground chunk, and this is going to be the actual chunk that we spawn. So we have that right there. After that, we're going to just do a little 2 for loops, one to loop through every length that we want to do, and one to loop through every width that we want to do. So I'll just write that now. Oh, sorry. Before that, I put the chunk name. This is just so you have an easier time identifying the chunks. It's not really important, but you don't want a bunch of chunks that just say spawn transform or spawn cube or whatever, because you really can't tell them apart. And it's just easier to debug it when they have a name. So now to write our for loop. The first for loop is for the length, and the second one is for the width. Just change that to the width. Now the next thing we need to do is instantiate our chunk at the position. So we're just going to create a chunk right here, and we're going to name it. We're going to make the ground chunk equal the instantiation so we can add stuff to it later. So we're spawning the chunk prefab, which is up here, and we're going to spawn it at the transform position. We're going to spawn it at the object that this script is attached to, but then we're going to add the offset so it knows exactly where to spawn it. So transform position X plus width offset, and we're not doing anything for the Y offset. And for the Z offset, it's going to be transform position Z plus the length offset. And we want it to spawn rotated any type of way because it's a cube, so it doesn't matter. So we're just going to keep the same rotation that it already has. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is give the cube a name. Ground chunk.name. This just tells us this just lets us name the cube so we know which one spawned, and then it tells us the width and the position of the cube. And this is just here because it's easier to debug it when you can see it like this. So if something goes wrong, you know exactly where it went wrong at. And the next thing we're going to do is make the width position +1 every time we spawn one of these cubes. So how it'll work is it'll spawn all of them. It'll spawn one right here for the length, and then it'll go across for the width, and then it'll spawn another one for the length and go across. So it'll basically go spawn right here, go across, spawn right here, go across, spawn right here, go across. And that's the way it'll do it. So now, well, first we got to add one to the chunk name, and then the wall at the end of it, the width offset has to equal 0 because it has to reset. So when it's going down, when it's going across like that, when it reaches the end, we want it to reset. And then we want to add the next length. And of course, last we have our start function, which we're going to call the script. Call a function. And of course, for our two parameters, we're going to add the length and the width. And that's it. I think sorry, I forgot to put the width thing. So just right here, we're going to put the width offset to +1. And that's it. So now we'll save it. And now you can see it's a pretty simple function. We just determining the length and the width of the world by these two variables right here. And then we have our number of chunks. Sorry, let me just add one more line. Number of chunks ++. So every time we spawn a chunk, that number of chunks will go up. So now you can see we have the length and the width of the world, the number of chunks, just for debugging purposes, the actual prefab we want to spawn and we want to use as the ground. And then we have our function spawn ground. It just takes the width and the length. And then we have two offsets, width and length. The ground chunk, which is just going to be object we want to spawn. And just to get the name of the chunk just so we don't get confused. We loop through the length and we loop through the length once, and we loop through the width once. And then we just instantiate the ground chunk, give it a name. The width offset will go up by 1, and we'll just count the number of chunks. And then when we end each width, we wanted the width to reset, and then the length to go up by 1. And that's how you spawn a random world. So now let's just go in game and see how it works. So now I'm here back in Unity, and I've already set this all the way up, but just to do it again, I'll delete everything. Now the first thing we're going to do is create an empty game object, and we're just going to put this as spawn point. Then we're going to take our script, which is the spawn world script, and we're just going to put it on here. Next, we have to create a prefab, the one we wrote in there. So I'm just going to create a simple cube, and then I'm going to drag it down here so it can become a prefab, and delete this cube right here. Go to the spawn point, put the cube in here, and the first we got to set the length and the width. And just for the first time, I'm going to set it both to 10. And hit play. And you can see it spawned our world. Since both of them were even, it spawned a perfect cube. But if you wanted to spawn something irregular, you can just change one of these variables. And you can see it makes the world uneven. Now, you can just look over here. You can see its name in each one of these cubes. And we have 140. And this tells us the number of chunks right here. And it's a pretty simple script. Each one of these, you should be aware though, is an individual square. So it will take up processing power unnecessarily. There's probably a better way to do this, but this is the most simplest way. And if you're creating a simple game, you're not going to really worry about the fact that you're rendering all the faces of the cube. So anyway, that's the first step to generating a random world. I'll keep this tutorial series going until I show you how to spawn the tiles, and then I'll end it. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.